Very good.
Alrighty, let's go ahead and start the meeting. Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name's Tom Regan. I'm the chair of the Greater Royal Oak Democratic Club, and the other officers, could you introduce yourself, please?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Lauren Jasinski. I'm the co-chair.
Do we have our secretary or our treasurer on yet? If you guys are on, go ahead and introduce yourselves. Ian and Ian, oh, there you go. Go ahead, Ian.
Hi, my connection's a little unstable, so sorry about that. But hi, I'm Ian. I'm the treasurer for the club.
Is our secretary on yet? Our school board trustee?
And the same issues Ian's having this morning. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Tim Jaworski, the secretary.
Hi, Tim. And then we have a tradition in our club. If this is your first time here or your first time here in a long time, we invite you to introduce yourself and tell us why you came. And if you're interested in doing that, towards the bottom of your screen, click the participants icon. That'll open up a window on the right. And then inside there's a blue raise hand icon. And so click that right now. If you're interested in introducing yourself and telling us why you came, go ahead and click that now. And we'll give you a second to introduce yourself. Otherwise, we'll move right on to announcements. Is there anybody here, first time here or first time here in a long time, like to introduce yourself and tell us why you came? Okay, I'll go to announcements. If you'd like to join our club, our dues are $10 per month, $10 per person per year. We've got a way you can join online, and then we'll dump that link in the chat. We have our officer elections in January. We'll elect chair, co-chair, chair, vice chair, secretary, and treasurer for 2021. And if you're interested in running for one of those offices or voting in that election, you have to be a dues paying member. And if you pay your dues this month in December of 2020, they count towards your 2021 calendar year dues. So you can either pay your dues right now or this month or before the meeting on January, and you'll be able to vote in that election. Does anybody else have any other announcements? If you do, click that blue raise hand icon, and again, scroll over the bottom of your screen, click the icon that says participants. That'll open up the window on the right side, and then inside there you'll see the blue raise hand icon. That's what you'll click if you'd like to say something during the meeting. And hearing no announcements, let's go right to our first guest speaker. Ben Ogden is the Executive Director of the Welcome In Day Center in Royal Oak. The South Oakland Citizens for the Homeless operates it. It is a low barrier day center, the only one in South Oakland, and they work on providing services to homeless people and trying to move them into permanent housing. So without further ado, let's hear from Ben Ogden. Thanks, Ben.
Hey, thank you. Good morning. Actually, you summed it up pretty well, so thanks for having me, and you all have a great day. I certainly appreciate the opportunity. I'll set a timer because I can be a little long-winded as I prattle on. I've worked with Arv on many occasions, and he asked that I at some point come and talk to the group more about homelessness in our area, less about a sales pitch for what we do, because that information is via the website and all that good stuff. So I'm going to kind of start tearing through a little bit of PowerPoint, a set of slides that I've used with the City of Royal Oak, the City of Ferndale, which I just recently moved to, that discusses homelessness kind of in a general sense, but a local sense. And then if we have questions as we go along, please jump in. I like engagement, I like conversation. I've been working with chronic homelessness, or what you would consider street homelessness, for 17 years now, 2003 to 2015 in downtown Detroit. And I've been with South Oakland Citizens since then till now. So I've got a little bit of history in the mix. So I'm going to launch a PowerPoint, and I think, how does that work? So do I share screen first? Share screen. And
Yeah,
I want
down
to
at the
share
bottom,
that.
the share screen option, and it should ask
There we
you
go.
what you want to share.
And what I want, slideshow from beginning. Everybody's got a slideshow?
Perfect. Yeah.
Awesome.
Great.
Very good. So let's go through just some really quick basic definitions. Homelessness is anyone who lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residency. Essentially living in a place not meant for human habitation, condemned house, bridge overpass, automobile, tent in a field, any of those types of scenarios. Anyone living in a shelter, transitional housing, or utilizing a hotel or a motel as a place of residency. Anyone within 14 days of an enforceable eviction. This is kind of a hot topic right now because we've got moratoriums on evictions. But the reality is there are people that are in the process of eviction, not because they can't pay their rent, but because of other mitigating factors. Anyone within a week of exiting an institution where they've been for less than 90 days, that could be a rehab facility, a treatment facility, incarceration, but did not have a place of residency prior to that release, and anyone fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence. These are the key definitions of homelessness for when we're dealing with service providers and what they have to do to be able to categorize folks that they work with. The three main types of homelessness are episodic, transitional, and chronic. In brief, an episodic situation is, let's say you're an apartment resident and there's a flood. They have to displace everyone into a hotel for a little while they mitigate the problem. You go back in, you're off and running. Hopefully you had renter's insurance, your damaged stuff is covered. A transitional homeless person we're seeing a lot of now, where people are going through loss of income. They don't necessarily have the robust safety nets, so they're in a homeless situation for a little longer than 3 days, maybe it's a couple weeks. And then we deal with what's called chronic homelessness, which is the folks that I work with, the folks that Welcome Inn Day Center works with. And these are people who are basically experiencing homelessness for longer than a year, or have been homeless 4 or more times in the last 3 years. Now, those are HUD definitions, and the reality is that folks that are in chronic homelessness, many of them span decades of homelessness. So the core definition is 4 or more times in the last 3 years. But in the almost 20 years that I've been doing this, there are people that have been in and around the system the entire time. So we see chronicity spanning much, much greater than that time frame. Specific to Oakland County, which is where I'm located, which is where our day center located, just a quick point. These are census numbers. They might be a little off, but they're pretty close to accurate. Where we're at now in Oakland County, 1.26 million people. About 103,000 of us are below the poverty threshold. I'm going to include stats from Macomb and Wayne because, as we'll see in just a moment, with homelessness, you technically have no county of residency. We are in kind of a tri-county cluster, so a lot of shifting that goes back and forth, and our neighboring counties and their prosperity definitely affect the nature of homeless population in our county. So we see, a slight difference in rates of poverty threshold there, but the current poverty threshold, for those who don't know, for a family of 4 is $33,000 a year. So that's not a ton of money to try to raise 4 people in today's world. So what are the contributors? What are the core common factors when we deal with homelessness in large? And housing or access to affordable housing, certainly an issue. Education, definitely a problem that we deal with as far as a quality of public education when we're dealing with more affluent communities compared to communities that struggle economically. Employment opportunities easily. I grew up in Oakland County. My first job was as a caddy at Red Run Golf Course. My second job was at a Farmer Jack gas grocery store, and I had 2 of them within 1 mile of my home, and I could walk there from school. So, and in doing so, passing tons of fast food restaurants and other places that employed young adults. Lots of opportunity. Accessible transportation. We obviously live in a region where mass transit has historically not been of importance. Certainly not to the folks who are in charge of mass transit. Certainly it's important to those who need it. Healthcare, the cost of healthcare, the accessibility of healthcare. Domestic violence is a definite homelessness contributor. Mental illness, no question. And then of course, addiction. Now, the interesting part about this list is if you look at the top components, all of those have one specific thing in common. The latter 3 we find in all walks of life, regardless of demographic or financial background. But the top 5 are definitely related to what we would say is economic strife. So any situation where we're dealing with, let me go back 1 slide, a lack of access to consistent income are going to affect those factors. Those factors are then going to underlie the likelihood of homelessness. And then the latter 3 are all kind of transfer across the board. Do we have any questions? I know I'm kind of tearing through this. Do we have any questions so far, or am I good to continue? Anyone? Okay. So helping the homeless, what are the solutions? This is, obviously that's a core primer for what's going on around us. And the solutions to homelessness are huge, but not really when you boil them down. Uh, Obviously, the first one is going to be what you would call a permanent supportive housing situation. Folks, when you're dealing with chronicity of homelessness, and I hate to say this, and I hope not to offend anybody, but when you are decades out of living in a community, you almost have a feral nature about you. You're in a survival and instinctive mode. And taking someone straight off the streets of chronic homelessness and dropping them in an apartment and saying, hey, here's your place, good luck, you made it, does not work. A permanent supportive housing or a longer term supportive scenario where we work with individuals to not just get that apartment, which is great, but to find furniture for that apartment, to decorate that apartment. Because someone who's comfortable living in a shelter, if they're put in an apartment in a neighborhood they don't know and it's unfurnished, they are oftentimes going to gravitate back to what's familiar because it's comfortable. And so getting someone into a scenario where you can help them make that apartment a home, help them learn how to engage with community members, with neighbors, learn bus routes, grocery shopping, budget planning, all of the things that we have to do in quote unquote normal life, that's what really gets them that kind of core foundation. It also lowers public costs associated with crisis services, shelters, hospitals, jails, and prisons. On a side note, Malcolm Gladwell, a zillion years ago, wrote a great summary called $1 Million Murray. I urge everyone to look it up. It's available for free on PDF now. And he tracked a guy named Murray living in Denver who was a chronic alcoholic. And in a year's time, Murray amassed over $1 million in emergency medical room bills. And one of the points that Malcolm Gladwell made was that if we took Murray and simply put him in an apartment and made no effort to correct his behavior, just made him safe in how he made his choices, we were looking at an annual cost of less than 30 grand compared to the 1 million in emergency medical expense. So permanent supportive, even if we're not addressing underlying causes, is an important component for mitigating this regurgitation of homelessness that we see. Low barrier shelters are the second critical key. Now, Welcome Inn is a low barrier shelter. And what that means is as long as you're not a physical threat to yourself or someone else, you'll be able to come in. If you're high, if you're drunk, if you're having a psychiatric issue, you'll be allowed to come in. Now, low barrier entry doesn't mean low barrier stay, so don't bring your bottle in with you and continue to sip and don't continue to get high, but it's access that does not put restrictions aside from physical safety on folks. So that way we can get them in, help them get kind of straight and sober, start assessing the issues that they're dealing with, and then try to provide supportive care around them. Also, what low barrier shelters do, especially in today's world, is provide an access point for higher level services. And a group like Community Housing Network that does a lot of our PATH outreach and homeless services, if they have to simply walk the streets to find homeless folks, they're going to have a hard time reaching them because a lot of them hide. They're scared. They don't want their encampments overturned. And so a low barrier shelter system is a great place where these outside providers that provide higher level care can come in and wrap around and start reaching out. And then the most controversial point on this is, of course, prevention. And that's probably not a conversation for today, but it goes back to that initial list of housing opportunities. An example, Michigan has a 5% maximum annual increase on your property taxes. It was passed, I think, back in the 60s to prevent seniors from being taxed out of their homes. But on large, Oakland County does not have rental restrictions that limit how much rent can climb. And so by nature alone, that disadvantages people who can't afford to buy a house. It's access to jobs, it's access to healthcare, it's access to transportation, it's access to a fair and equitable public education. And I make that point a lot. I do a lot of speaking at schools, from Detroit schools to Mid-Oakland County schools to Pontiac schools. And when I go into a school in Beverly Hills that I'm on their social justice committee, I see 80-inch touchscreen TVs on the walls, and it's a public school. Now, I'm not implying that a Detroit school or a Pontiac school should have 80-inch touchscreens because property taxes afford better stuff. But I've been in schools where they're literally dealing with torn and shredded textbooks, and it's a public school. And when you don't have an equal playing field for a child to go and get an education and an understanding and a way to think about the world, we're disadvantaging from the start. So prevention is a deep, deep problem that is much bigger than me. certainly political in nature, in my opinion, because it's all of those initial components that could be addressed if we just kind of operated in an equitable fashion and gave everybody a fair and equal shot right from the start. So really quick about Welcome In. South Oakland Citizens for the Homeless is our 501c3. We began in 2003. We have a corresponding overnight shelter system that we work with that started in 1998. That is what precipitated the need for us. When emergency shelters opened in downtown Royal Oak in the late 90s, they drew a homeless population to the city that was not always there. Unfortunately, those shelters, being churches, most of them having schools or daycares on the ground, had to discharge the guests every morning, who would then hang out and wander the city for 12 hours until the night shelters reopened. That is good for no one in the middle of winter. Homeless folks were struggling to stay warm. Community residents didn't know how to react. Police were struggling with how to deal with the en masse group of folks. So Common Ground Sanctuary, Royal Oak governments, Royal Oak community residents all got together and formed South Oakland Citizens for the Homeless, which started the day center. We work with the overnights and take them during the daytime, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and then take them via bus back to the night shelters at night. As it was said in the beginning, we're the only low barrier shelter system in South Oakland County. There is not another one that works in a low barrier capacity and can handle the volume of folks that we can in a non-COVID year. That's kind of an important thing. Currently, we're based in Royal Oak. The day center is at 13 Mile and Crooks, and our season is set this year to begin December 14th through March 12th, 2021. Just as kind of an idea, last year our service numbers, we had 220 unique guests, averaged 55 a day, served over 10,000 meals, and we had what you would call a unique guest or total guest check-ins of 3,300 in a 13-week span, just tons and tons of folks. Right now in Oakland County, there are roughly 400 chronically homeless. That's the current data that I could find. What that is, and here's my contact information, when you look at homelessness chronicity, it has for many, many years and still tends to be accurate. Chronic homelessness is about 10% of the overall homeless population. So, and when they do a point in time count in Oakland County last year, they counted almost 400 folks that were either in places not fit for habitation or in emergency shelters. And when we look at current Michigan data, our Tri-County cluster is floating around 4,000-ish homeless. So we're seeing that those numbers are pretty on par with each other. All of those on the screen now are ways to get a hold of me for questions beyond all of that. And I would love to engage in conversation with anyone who has questions.
Yeah, there was a couple of questions in the chat, which I'll read from you. But first, I want to point out, I live directly behind that day center at 13 and Crooks. And we've never had a single problem with them. I mean, I do see the people queuing up sometimes for this or that, but we've never had a single problem. It's a very extremely well-run shelter.
Thanks. And the key is getting the guests to accept that they're part of the community while they're with us as well. We're not going to visit our problems on a community that says, come stay with us. And we work very hard with kind of comportment of behavior.
But Allison Bone asks in the chat, are there any resources that you recommend for homeless teens and young adults?
So homeless teens, yeah, I definitely Common Ground is still a great resource. And young adults, we try to funnel through there. We as a low barrier day center are adult only. We don't do background checks when you come in. And so because we know that not everybody in the mix of our crew are going to be awesome, we have to protect young adults. So we generally, if we get a family that comes in with kids, we compartmentalize them and get them off through Common Ground. But that's really kind of the best local provider. I know that SOS does families as far as sheltering, but it's tricky with SOS because their volume, they're generally limited to less than 40 or 50 people. But SOS, which is now Lighthouse in Pontiac, they merged. They also do work with families and young adults in Oakland County.
But Paul Curtis, you had a question. Go ahead, Paul.
Hey, Ben, thanks for coming and sharing with us, and thanks for all your hard work on behalf of the homeless. We appreciate you. 17 years, man. Good, really good on you.
Thanks.
We kind of skipped over prevention, but I wanted to ask you, because you strike me as a person who has an answer to this, what specific public policies do you think we could be advocating for that would really make a difference for chronic homelessness?
people who are currently homeless or preventing next generations thereof?
Yeah, it's more about prevention in my mind.
Because yeah, there's an old saying, it's easier to raise a healthy child than fix a broken adult. And that's the reality. And it's not easy to raise a healthy child. And in my world, I look at what I do, sadly, to some degree, as what I call social hospice. With the chronicity of homelessness, and I've known folks that have been on the streets for 20 years, to some degree, I am just easing their suffering as their lives are in the gloaming. So it really is prevention. And so from a policy standpoint, in my opinion, it has to be dealing with kids, children, young adults, no question. And it's, we deal with a lot of fractured families, and we're not going to get into the politics of unconnected parents raising kids without co-parenting and all of that mess. If a kid is in a community that has some access to safe and appropriate recreation, and if that kid is in a school that has access to good, legitimate resources, quick internet, good computers, but not just that, but music and arts and these things that give us a more rounded way of thinking. People don't realize that music and arts are not just teaching folks to do something fancy. It's changing how your brain conceptualizes things. And when schools struggle with money, the first thing they start trimming is music and arts. A lot of schools then just focus on sports, which is important, but that's a mindset of thinking that is not good necessarily myopically as a whole and in a community setting. So in my opinion, it's really looking at some equality of a core public education system. And I'm not saying that every school deserves the same amenities. I know that where I live, my property taxes afford certain things, and I have to work to sustain those property taxes because I want those things. But I also know that if I go to Seaholm, which I love doing, and again, I'm on their social justice advisory board, the amenities at that school, which is public, and then I go to a Detroit school and I watch kids literally to this day still sharing textbooks. There's such a vast difference in a core public education. And that's where the prevention starts, because that kid then can get a job because they can reason more effectively, they can emote more effectively, and they can climb out differently. It at least gives them the tools. When you've got a fractured family in a fractured community in a deficient public school system with no access to jobs, no access to transport, you landlock folks and they have no future. And that's a generalization, but generalizations are that way because statistically they're proportionate. So schools, in my opinion, is where it starts. I mean, beyond that, it's working with young men and women on trying to determine to prolong having kids and co-parent whether we like each other or not, because that's a big factor in today's world. But that's a bigger mess than just trying to get some folks some equal education.
Lynn Muth has a question. Lynn, go ahead, please.
Yeah, my question is, I just finished the book Evicted, and it had some really interesting points about the exploitation of people in poverty by some of the landlords. And when you talk about prevention, it did strike me that in looking at COVID ahead, what are we facing in terms of eviction, and is there anything we can do to help?
Well, and right now, currently, my understanding, and I'm working a lot with Oakland County, and hey, Dave, it's been a little while since I saw you. It continues to be a moratorium on eviction for lack of payment. I know that there are a lot of good county-supported legal resources that are helping with that. So right now, I think they're okay. The issue is there are a lot of people that behaviorally are in the process of eviction, and one does not save the other. We've got folks that have lost jobs that can't afford and are great tenants, but there are people that are not great tenants. And this moratorium on rental eviction should really have no effect on someone who is destroying property and that type of stuff. So we've got to draw a line between, in today's world, COVID world, what is the nature that is underlying the eviction? And if it is simply someone who since June, July has not been able to pay rent because they lost their job, we need to protect them. If it's someone who is inviting friends and family in that are outside of the scope, that are breaking rules of the community that is pre-established when you sign a lease, those are folks that it's a different element. And we have to kind of set that aside because that is a behavioral choice reality compared to victims of circumstance. So right now, my understanding again is there's still a freeze on rental-based evictions. And I think that that's going to continue to hold for a little while. And hopefully until we get to perhaps a new president who might actually care about the Commonwealth, and then kind of make sure we as a country are taking care of each other while we get back on our feet. So right now I think that's okay, but being mindful, again, being democratic myself and being left myself, I always have to be clear of the line that some people are getting evicted because they're not awesome. And some people are getting evicted because life is just shaking them around. And I've got to compartmentalize which is which.
Michael James had a question. Michael James, go ahead, please.
Yes, first of all, I just want to agree a lot with what you said about schools. The first time I lived in Michigan, I lived in Bloomfield Hills. And when we had an election, I go to the local elementary school, and the place was awesome. But my friend, she was teaching in the Detroit schools, and the roof was leaking near her desk, and it was a disaster, her classroom. So, I mean, I could see this educational thing. But my question is as far as are people becoming, maybe you don't know the answer, but are people becoming homeless because of job loss, or is it because the wages are so low that they don't have ever build up kind of resources, or is it all the above? I mean, when I think about solutions, I'm wondering, do we need more jobs, or do we need higher incomes, or I don't know. What are your thoughts? That's it.
Yeah, it is all of the above, but it's also again, providing work opportunity for young adults so they can learn the nature of work. I had a boss when I was 15, and he would work me a lot of hours, and I would say, "Hey, Joe, can I get a break?" And he would look at me in all earnestness and say, "I gave you a break when I hired you." And I learned at 15 to either bite my tongue because I wanted that fresh pair of new Nike shoes, or tell Joe how I felt. And because I made those choices and understood the world I was in, I worked around, and continued to accelerate myself to where I could start gaining access to better and more robust employment opportunities. So we can't wait until someone's 23 to give them their first job. So you've got to kind of roll that back and provide access. Yes, a living wage is certainly important. We pay our part-time workers $14 an hour. It's not the 15, but it's a wage that I think is reasonable to where I can look at someone and expect performance in return. If it's $9 an hour, you can make more money than that almost doing nothing in today's world for a lot of folks. So definitely wage is important, but access to job is important, but it's the age of the access to jobs, because it teaches us kind of, again, a way to comport ourselves within a work environment. We all, every person I see on the screen has worked with someone who was terrible to work with. And you either decided, like a river, you either bang away, or you just go around it and continue. And the folks that learn how to work around and continue on are the folks that find access to success. But that starts young, and we don't give that opportunities to the young, because, again, where do they go to get those jobs? Where do they go to get that access? So yes and yes.
Then Arv Reddy had a question. Arv, go ahead, please.
Oh, hi. Thanks, Ben. Sorry, I wish I'd written this out. But a question I have is, like, the churches did a great job coming forward to do this, back when they started the overnight system. And, the Welcome Inn does a great job. But what I was kind of wondering is like, should this be like a public responsibility that, like, government, a service that government provides? Like, do you think that instead of just leaving it to private groups to take care of? I guess that's it.
My opinion is yes, because if it doesn't get handled by private citizens, it will grow and become enormous, and then the government has to handle it. And so getting involved on a lower floor, I think, helps mitigate how big that problem could potentially become. And so yes, I don't think that, I'm of the opinion that it takes a village to raise a child, but I was raised by my grandmother, as my single mom worked 2 jobs, and that was a different mentality and mindset. I live in a community where we have relationships with our neighbors, we get along. And so yes, it's got to go that way.
And then Brock and Devin had a question. Go ahead, Brock and Devin.
Just my name on is Brian Nevin, but I have a question on sort of the local level. It's just, I guess, the hyper local level. What are your opinions on donating money directly to homeless people when, you know, we see someone who's experiencing homelessness on the streets, or even walking the median at a red light or something like that? Do you think that it's an effective way to help people, or is there, is that to be discouraged? And specifically, I was wondering, I had a friend who had an idea where he bought gift cards, and if you saw someone who was experiencing homelessness, give them gift cards to say McDonald's for like, you know, $15. That way, you know, the money will be used for food. I wanted to get your thoughts on that, because I've heard, you know, varying points that some say you shouldn't ever donate to some people, some say as well, you know. So just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
And just, your sound was breaking up a bit, so I'm going to repeat his question, but he was wondering, does it do more harm than good to give money or gift cards directly to homeless people, or should you donate through institutions like the Welcome Inn? Go ahead, Ben.
I think it depends on what definition of good you're looking for in the moment. If someone's hungry, a gift card does a lot of good. I'm not a huge fan of giving money, mostly because I think people get very uncomfortable in that moment. I am a big fan of the McDonald's Arch card, because you can get an Arch card that has $5 loaded on it. It has a value that's beyond $1 or so. I know that I carry them, my girlfriend carries them, and what that also does is allows her, she works in Detroit, to help someone who's homeless in a way that doesn't make her feel uncomfortable, where she has to open her purse and select an amount to give someone where they could see that she has more, not even implying that they have any nefarious ideas in mind, but there's that exchange all of a sudden where if she's got you know, a couple 20s in her wallet and a 1, obviously, you know, we've got bills to pay too. So it takes out of that moment. It is certainly harder by any stretch to convert an Arch card into anything inappropriate. But to some degree, if someone wants to work hard enough to turn an Arch card into half a pack of cigarettes, then, you know, I support entrepreneurship to that degree. So it's what is our definition of help in the moment? In the grand scheme, continuing to help someone at the same location constantly throughout the day, we begin to enable. I know that to some degree what I do after almost 20 years in this, when I know people today that I've known as being homeless since I started, to some component of what I do enables. When I run a winter shelter that sets up and says, come on in, regardless of the choices you've made all summer, we will take care of you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week through the meat of the winter, that is to some degree enabling. But by doing that, in my world, when I open those doors, it's a pot of stew. Everybody come in, and we reach in and pull out the ones who are ready, willing, and able to come out. So there's always going to be an enabling component if we want to really boil it down and look at it from those fractures. That said, help in a moment is a pack of trail mix when someone's hungry, is a Dunkin' Donuts card where they can go get a cup of coffee. That's help, because the kindness is help. The gesture is help. Beyond that, absolutely. You know, if you're giving $20 to homeless folks, I would say find a good organization and support them, whether it's Welcome Inn, whether it's Hope Shelters in Pontiac, which is not the same as Grace Centers of Hope. They're good as well. I've worked a lot with Hope. They do enormously great work. They're a bigger version of us, low barrier recuperative care. So there are organizations out there that do awesome work with the money. I think we're one of them. When we look at how much we spend comparatively to what we do, I think we're one of the awesome ones. But find an ideology that makes you comfortable and just stick with it and get yourself out of that uncomfortable engagement point when someone's either approaching you on a corner or at an intersection. Have packs of nuts, have an Arch card, have something you can give them that has some substance and value, and that is help, because that person gets ignored countless times throughout the day. And sometimes that is heartbreaking every time it happens. They might be numb to it peripherally, but it's a poke every single time someone's sitting right next to them and we're looking dead ahead with our hands on the wheel, pretending not to know that they're there. That's not helping. So I think there are lots of ways to engage that moment that the person will feel love and care, that doesn't put us in a position where we're feeling like we're giving too much, doing the wrong thing, or putting ourselves at risk.
Royal Oak City Commissioner Pat Peruch with a question. Go ahead, please. You're muted, Pat.
I apologize. I do that all the time at regular meetings. They have to yell at me every time. Ben, thanks so much for coming this morning. We really, really appreciate it. And your shelter operations have been such a blessing to our community for such a long time. And the fact that you're as engaged as you are is very reassuring to us, to know that there are people like you involved with this chronic issue, which we've been struggling with, as you know, for decades, and will continue to. My comments is just a little bit of a follow-up to Arv's comments about getting governments involved more directly in services to the homeless. You all should understand that by state statute and by city charter, and most city charters reflect this, local governments, especially cities, cannot spend local tax dollars on social services like direct services directly to the homeless. That's just a quirk in state law, and it's reflected in our city charter. So, for example, the city of Royal Oak could not go out and spend taxpayer dollars to create our own shelter. However, there are workarounds which we have used for decades to get around that, to assist 501c3s and other local organizations who are providing services to the homeless. This city is a direct recipient of federal community development block grant monies. And ever since the inception of that program, Royal Oak has dedicated a certain portion of those funds that we receive annually to either the South Oakland Shelter or to other shelter organizations. And then this year, when we received fairly significant hundreds of thousands of dollars of CARES Act funds, we went through a brainstorming session to decide the best way to apportion those funds to make the biggest impact. And a significant amount of it went to services for the homeless, to provide not only direct services to organizations like Ben's, but also money for hotel stays and rent payments and utility payments and so on, as well as funds to Lighthouse and funds for food support to Forgotten Harvest and other organizations that are providing food supplements through the pandemic. And so by the use of federal funds, cities like Royal Oak have been able to work around the prohibition of having their own social service facilities and support the ones in the nonprofit sector that are doing such a great job. So when you see a community like Royal Oak or Birmingham and you wonder, well, why don't they have their own shelter? It's because legally we can't. We have a very narrow window of what we can spend taxpayer dollars on. But we can find creative ways to use the other federal funds that come our way. And most communities are doing that to the best they can. So good luck, Ben. Let us know if there's anything else we can do to help you, and Godspeed.
Well, thank you. And to that point, we are a Royal Oak Block Grant recipient.
Yes.
It actually, enough so that it offsets the cost of our rent for the season, which, as you would imagine, when you're housing 65 chronically homeless people, is not cheap. So there is no question that Royal Oak is invested, and Royal Oak is in a unique position. Really quickly, I know that time is getting short. Ferndale, Royal Oak, some Birmingham, the homeless presence is much higher. Royal Oak more than any of them, and it's because the volume of streets that comprise a centralized business district with restaurants and businesses and residences and all of those things, it is bigger than Ferndale. And Royal Oak, no offense to anybody, is a little nicer and more accepting of homeless than Birmingham. So homeless, and Royal Oak has a transit center downtown. Yeah. So Royal Oak will always have, out of, when we look at the Woodward corridor of Oakland County, Ferndale, Royal Oak, Birmingham, Pontiac, Royal Oak will always have the highest presence of homelessness because it is not illegal to be homeless and it is not illegal to ask for money. There are laws around how we do it as far as ATMs and outside dining areas and stuff like that. But Royal Oak will always be, and which is why the overnight started in the 90s, because there's always been some sense of downtown in Royal Oak that's been bigger than Ferndale. And Royal Oak has always, at least historically, in my understanding, been a little bit more accepting of the homeless that would come to the community.
Yes, that's always been the case.
But it has to be faced. You know, Pontiac is a little different, and Oakland County likes to centralize a lot of its services out in Pontiac. There's more access to buildings, that type of stuff. But Royal Oak will always be the one that is confronted most with a homeless population because of the busyness, because of the walkability, the bike lanes. You know, homeless folks walk and ride bikes, and because of the transit center. And so as such, they're going to have to be, to some degree, at the forefront of mitigating the suffering of the homeless, as well as the potential negative impact that they might inflict on the community around them. You know, everybody's got to do it together. So, yeah, Royal Oak is definitely a supporter of what we do, for sure.
Unfortunately, we have more questions than time. We have Patrick Hsu from America Votes is going to give us an election debrief. We usually only have one guest speaker per meeting, but because of the election, we have two this time, so I'm going to have to call time. But Ben, if you could please put your contact information in the chat, and then if anybody has any more questions for Ben, you can email him or call him, depending on the contact information.
I will do it right now. Thank you so much, everyone. And
please,
via our
please
website, our sign up is available. Go ahead.
Okay, and please stay on the call because we're going to have our treasurer's report. And then if anybody wants to make a motion about making a donation to your organization, we'll entertain that then. So first, Ian, could you please give our treasurer's report so everybody knows what our balance is?
Yep, if I'm breaking up too much, let me know and I'll type it in the chat. We had $160 income from dues in the month of November. And our current balance is $3,829.14. As I mentioned, just since I'm on the report, Lauren and I did drop the link if you want to pay your dues for next year as well. And I just added a section where if you're paying dues for more than one person, you can actually add that as a note at the very end before you check out. So that way you can put the names of the people included. But I'll put the number in the chat just as a reminder for what the final amount was.
So our balance is $3,800. Then usually for our December meetings, we have usually a charity, some kind of charity we support, and then someone will make a motion that we make a donation to said charity. But if anybody would like to make that motion now, go ahead and click that blue raise hand icon and we'll go from there. Trevor Formby, go ahead, please. You're muted, Trevor.
Oh, yes. I'd like to make a motion that we make a donation to the Welcome In.
And then throw an amount out there just for discussion purposes.
$100?
$100. Anybody want to discuss that? Is there a second? Click that blue raise hand. There you go. Paul and Claire Viola are the second. Any discussion on the amount?
I would like to amend that motion to make that $500.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Anybody have any?
What? How much money do you have? $3,800.
So there's a motion on the floor that we donate $500 to the Welcome In Day Center. Anybody have any discussion on that? Paul, did you have a discussion or were you just seconding?
No, well, not a discussion, just wanted to reinforce $500 is a donation.
Yeah.
So that'd put our balance down at about $3,300. Any other discussion on that?
I agree with 500.
Alrighty, so everybody who's in favor that we donate $500 to the Welcome In Day Center, indicate by clicking that green yes icon, and then if you're opposed, click that red no icon. So the place you see the icon at the bottom of the screen, you'll click that participants icon. That opens up a white window on the right, and then inside there's a little yes icon with a green check mark, a green background and a white check mark. It looks like we're passing pretty much unanimously. So Ian, go ahead and make out a check for $500 or however you pay, or donate online or however we do it nowadays. And
yeah, I'm super excited. I got a debit card off the account that should be coming in today, so I can make that online payment.
Alrighty. And Ben Ogden, thank you very much. You're an excellent spokesperson for Welcome In, and yeah, very informative, very, very inspirational talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. All my contact information is now in chat. Please feel free to reach out.
Alrighty, and then we'll post that in the post-meeting email as well. Thanks again, Ben. We really appreciate you coming.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks so much, Ben. Hey, before we do change gears entirely, I did just want to mention that there are, in addition to donating, I'll post the Welcome In's direct donation link again in the chat, but there is an opportunity to actually go serve and volunteer directly at their day center. Arv and I signed up for a slot on Monday, December 28th. The time slots for serving dinner are from 3 to 6. So you meet there in teams of 4, you prepare the meal. Obviously the rules are, Ben, I don't know if you're still on the call or not, but there are a lot of, if you've done this in the past with us, there is a much different process this year for COVID. Serving is going to look a little bit different. The size is going to look a little bit different, but we are going to still continue to do that. So we've already signed up for a slot on Monday. If there is a lot of interest, we can continue to sign up for other slots throughout the winter, but that's going to kind of kick us off. So we need a team of 4 to come help us with that. I've got a link for the sign up that I'll drop in the chat right now, or you can just send me a message.
Alrighty, thanks, Lauren. And sorry, I forgot to have you say that. Yeah, you messaged me and I forgot to ask you about that. We wanted to do that before Ben left the call. Sorry about that. Alrighty, Patrick Hsu, are you on the call? Patrick Hsu from America Votes. And we talked about having an election debrief, and we were going to ask our county commissioner, Dave Woodward, to do one. And he said, no, let's have Patrick Hsu do it instead. Or Dave, is your friend Patrick on the call?
Yeah, my friend Patrick. Where are you, Pat?
Yeah,
there you go.
There
Okay.
we go.
No,
All right.
let me introduce Patrick just so everyone knows. I mean, Patrick Hsu and I have, over the years, over 20 years, have gotten into what, as John Lewis would call good trouble on a lot of things. Patrick Hsu currently is together. Patrick Hsu is the executive director of America Votes, and he can tell you a little bit more about that. But basically an organization that coordinates progressive political organizations around the state to mobilize and efficiently help support the election of forward-thinking elected officials at varying levels of government. So the best and the guy who knows data better than anybody else. So I'm going to hand it over to Patrick, who provides not just direct guidance to me, but to all of our political leaders around the state. And we're just lucky he took time out of his morning to be with us. So Patrick, the floor is yours. And I think he has a presentation, so he needs to show a screen.
Yeah, I think
There you go.
There we go. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the invite here this morning. And Dave and I definitely have gotten into our fair share of trouble. Excuse me while I just switch my screen set up real quick. I just realized that it was not. You would think after many hours of Zoom meetings, I would have this 100% down by now, and not have the awkward transition during meetings. So apologies about that. There we go. All right. Can everybody see my screen okay? No? Yeah. America Votes, we really serve as the strategic coordination hub of the C4 independent expenditure community here in Michigan, helping partners build out strategic program and coordination, both on issue advocacy fights and direct electoral campaigns. Do a lot of work in the election administration space and democracy reform space as well. When we set out and looked at the 2020 election environment, these two maps really stood out to us. Looking at the voters who chose to not engage in the 2016 election, and where they actually do live, and we always had felt that white non-college voters were a potential strategic threat to our overall strategy and win scenario here in Michigan. About 284,000 voters did not vote in the 2016 election, but 64,000 actually did end up voting in the 2018 election. The Michigan file has a number of, Democratic-leaning voters on the file that, have very limited or no vote history over multiple cycles. So we knew the turnout scenario that winning Michigan isn't always about an increased turnout, but it's about engaging, persuading, and mobilizing our coalition. We saw a historic turnout across the state, large increases in overall percentage of turnout across the state. If you, counties like Saginaw, Genesee, Wayne, we didn't see as high of turnout. We actually saw reductions in turnout. I think we have to be really careful about how we talk about the narrative around the why around that, because until we actually get the voter file. Exit polls are historically inaccurate about predicting who showed up and voted. The pretty good indicators of the why and who they voted, who demographics voted for, but not the actual overall vote share. So a huge historic night here in 2020, and we should be celebrating this historic night that, over 5.5 million Michiganders showed up and voted. We won the state by 150,000 votes. I know we didn't get the repudiation of the Trump agenda that we all kind of were hoping to see on election day, but this is still, we actually had predicted, vote goal scenarios where we could potentially lose the state by 18,000 votes. And so we should be celebrating, our wins up and down the ballot. And the Supreme Court is a huge piece of that. Again, just reinforcing that large, high turnout doesn't always equal a win here in Michigan. The factor of third-party votes is, continuing to be a major significant factor here that we have to, pay attention to when third-party candidates are on the ballot, depending on the environment. That definitely was a huge role in the 2016 election. Undervotes were a major factor in the 2016 election. It didn't really play out the same here in the 2020 election that we saw. So some of the key differences, there were about 167,000 fewer third-party votes. We increased margins in changing suburbs. A lot of our conversations with our partners, and when we're talking about leaders around the state, is challenging our own traditional assumptions about the state, recognizing communities are changing, they're becoming more diverse in metropolitan areas. Some of the surrounding suburbs, you all in Oakland County are very familiar with this. But then also, just Proposal 3 in a pandemic. Little did a number of us who worked on the Prop 3 campaign in 2018 recognize we were setting up Michigan to prepare for a global pandemic. But it was also all that foundational work that we built in 2018 to win the governor's office, the Secretary of State's office, the Attorney General's office, down ballot races that really played a major factor into, just preparing Michigan better for a pandemic. A number of states in our neighboring states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, I worked closely with over the year. They changed the rules at midstream to adapt to the pandemic, and it was harder for them to adjust. There were fewer undervotes. We consolidated our coalition of voters, and I think we'll talk more about this coalition of voters dynamic here in a minute. This slide is really based off of 3.2 million absentee ballots. We haven't gotten the full qualified voter file update yet. We know that it's actually now 3.3 million absentee ballots were cast in this election cycle. About 245,000 vote advantage heading into election day for us. That's why a number of us in the middle of the morning when we were talking to the media were, after polls closed, we're feeling certain that we were on a path and trajectory for Biden to win. We knew Peter's race was going to be much closer. About 16% of the absentee vote was voters of color. When we dig into who didn't show up in 2016, 652,000 people had already voted before election day. That didn't vote in the 2016 election. This was actually a younger, more diverse audience. What we also just continue to see amongst absentee voting is voters are changing their voting behavior good voters are just voting earlier. And these are all significant things that we have to consider when we think about future election cycles. You know, really fascinating, and we'll know more once we get the full voter file. Under 35 voters actually increased their request of absentee ballots by 400% from 2016. So, you know, the impacts of Prop 3 definitely working here and adapting to the moment. As we entered the 2020 election cycle, we were trying to gauge turnout, and Dave will tell you I'm constantly arguing with people about trying to guess this guessing game of how many people are going to turn out and vote. We firmly believe that we know our coalition of voters, we know how many of those voters exist in our state, and our role and you know, need is to get those folks engaged, persuade our coalition, and mobilize them to the polls on election day. But, you know, the impact of absentee voting, 90% of our really reliable Democratic voters had already voted ahead of election day. And, you know, only about 55% of reliable Republican voters had voted ahead of election day. So that, you know, when we see these major swings and we think about the election day performance, you know, that was a significant factor here. You know, just the work that was put into enrolling people, encouraging folks. Meanwhile, Trump was telling his people not to vote by absentee ballot. You know, just recognizing some of the trends here in state. We're big on demographics and having this conversation about the shifting trends and population trends. The counties in red are the ones that are seeing actually, you know, significant population declines. Not surprisingly, the Lake Huron shoreline, the Thumb area, I mean, many of these communities have never recovered from the economic recession of the 80s. I grew up in northern mid-Michigan, here right in the, you know, heart of this. I spend a lot of my time now in Traverse City region, so just seeing a lot of these, you know, changing communities and the impacts, and we have to recognize these communities that are seeing rapid population growth are also becoming more diverse, and so we have to think about that the way we're engaging citizens in the democratic process and in elections, and recognize those changing communities as well. You know, when we think about the margins, Oakland County, like, yeah, I mean, Dave and I have been talking about Oakland for a number of years now, and, you know, I think the work that you all have been doing on the ground really paid huge dividends. And, you know, the margin that we saw here in Michigan, we flipped the margin 50,000 votes from 2012 to 2020. I focus a lot on the raw vote totals, not the percentage of votes, because that's how we win, right? And it especially is how we win in an environment where third-party candidates are on the ballot more and more. I take personal satisfaction in flipping, you know, 40,000 vote margin in Kent County, Betsy DeVos's backyard. You know, we're starting to see trends that just continue to move our way here in Kent. Counties like Bay, Monroe, Saginaw, you know, and Wayne are all seeing population decline. So of course our margins are changing here. It doesn't mean that we're actually underperforming. We just, you know, our margin is slightly changing from that 2012 to 2016 because of that. You know, a lot of the exit polls are telling the story about, in our own post-election research, about who won the day for us: a younger coalition, more diverse coalition, college-educated women in the suburbs in particular, you know, drove our coalition. So this is what this ends up looking like for Biden, and the map on the right is actually our shift from Biden to Clinton. You know, we recapture Saginaw County by a very, very narrow margin of 284 votes. Bay County has been trending away from us. Saginaw and Genesee have been, you know, troubles areas for us for a couple cycles now. But, you know, you look at the Lake Michigan shoreline, look at Oakland, look at Livingston, right? You know, just the trends that we're starting to see here because of the shifting populations and where our coalition lives. Meanwhile, Senator Peters, you know, path to his more narrow victory, you know, looks a bit different than President-elect Biden's. Narrower margins in suburban communities, doesn't quite get the win in Kent County. a very narrow win in Eaton County, just outside of Lansing, with less than 50% of the vote. The Macomb County deficit slightly narrow. And what we're seeing up here, the smaller map on the left is the difference between Peters and Biden. The Lake Huron shoreline, better performance, weaker performance on the Lake Michigan shore. Sorry, my mouse is very touchy too today. And then the lower right-hand corner map is actually the Peters 2020 to 2014 difference in performance as well. So the landscape here in Michigan is definitely changing, where we get our votes from, and our margins is definitely changing as well. Drilling down into Oakland County for y'all and looking at the overlay of the state legislative map, this is Biden's performance, at a local community level. We see strong performance along that southern part of the county, places like Pontiac, right? But then when we look at what does that performance shift in comparison look like to Biden and Clinton, places like Pontiac, Southfield, Oak Park, we actually slightly underperform. Clinton, we knew heading into the election cycle, more diverse communities. We needed to do more engagement, younger Black men in particular. Trump's campaign was very active with them since he was elected president. Peter's performance, compared to Biden at a community level looks very different as well. And just where he's, picking up his vote margins compared to President-elect Biden as well, just looks, slightly different to where, Senator Peters underperforms Biden across the county just by small little incremental margins, right? Just showing you your neighbor, Macomb County, partly because we're, digging into demographic data and so for those of you familiar with Macomb, right, just looking at the way this plays out at a community level and overlaid with, several gerrymandered state legislative districts. But for us, the more interesting map here in Macomb that we're developing for Oakland is actually looking at the white population shift and white vote share across election cycles and how these performances overlap. The more diverse these communities are becoming, the higher Democratic performance we're seeing in more white areas of the county. We're actually seeing decreases in performance. So we've got to look really hard and internally in this conversation about our resource distribution at a campaign level when we're talking about focusing on white working class voters versus our coalition of voters of color, younger voters, suburban college educated women. Of course, white working class voters are an important voting bloc for us as a Democratic Party historically, and we shouldn't ignore that. But thinking about the level of resource investment we continue to invest there, we should be, considering, just as we think about the performance shift here in a place like Macomb County and those population trends. Absentee ballots, are a pretty significant source. About 73% of President Biden's vote was absentee ballot votes. Trump's was about 45%. This is estimates. We'll know more once we get voter file data and precinct level data. But, major, share of the vote being cast by absentee ballot, and likely a huge reason, President-elect Biden wins the day here in Michigan. At a state legislative level, we're going to talk about House District 39 and 45 just for a minute, because had we actually performed at President-elect Biden's absentee ballot performance, we would be looking at a tied legislative chamber here in Michigan in those two districts. Looking back at the communication timelines, and when investments were made up and down programs, I think we got to dig back into that backward looking conversation and see what happened here in 39 and 45 in particular with the timing and investment of communications. Absentee voting is not going away. once people vote an absentee ballot, this just becomes a historical trend line for them. About 76% of the competitive state legislative district vote was absentee ballot compared to the Republican 42% here. The shift between legislative Dem and Biden at a community level, we can, take a look at and drill down here. In the competitive districts, we're actually slightly underperforming Biden. At a community level, you can see that here play out. Some of our incumbents actually overperforming President-elect Biden. When we look at, this just election day to absentee vote, the story becomes even more clear that, some of these vote margins were clearly at the absentee vote and the early vote window that we needed to do better and within a few of these districts to get to our win scenario. We come close to performing. 39 is a slightly different story, partly where, running against an incumbent, but, thinking about the investments of week 1 and week 2 being outspent in some of these scenarios as well. At a congressional district level, President Biden loses, CD8 by 21,000 votes within Oakland County. Our Democratic candidate wins by 2,600 votes. It's interesting the way this plays out in the absentee vote to election day vote. And CD11 is actually a slightly different scenario here. So it'll be interesting to look backwards at timeline and communications here, just moving forward, but also drilling down at a community level here. We can see that, impact of straight party voting as well. I think a common narrative is that straight party voting always helps Democrats. This election cycle had actually played out slightly different. And part of it is we were seeing independent voters voting earlier via absentee ballot, probably less likely to just go in and plunk a straight party ticket. But in all of these key legislative districts, the Republican share of their total vote actually was higher than the Democratic candidates here. So that, again, this is something that we have to think about and learn some lessons from and challenge. At the congressional district level, CD8, only about 47% of Slotkin's vote was straight party. Her challenger was about 64% of his vote. Supreme Court, we all should be, super excited about, the work that happened here. Elizabeth Welch wins by a broader margin than President-elect Biden. A ton of early communications happened here in this race. We definitely saw roll off. We knew we would see roll off in the race. This is how this plays out at a regional level. The map actually looks a little bit different than Biden's map. Even in Oakland County, we, a 74,000 vote advantage in Oakland. Kelly really just couldn't, capture Trump's vote, about 164,000 fewer votes than Trump here in Oakland County. But, it just really starts adding up the ability to capture additional votes, out of each of the key counties around the state. The way this plays out by absentee ballot, about almost 80% of Welch's vote within Oakland County actually came from absentee votes. And so that's a huge factor. About 75% of McCormick's vote came from absentee ballots. So, just thinking about those timelines of communication, thinking about the way that also played out for Republicans is going to be, pretty important here moving forward as well. So just some of our key takeaways right now, winning statewide really requires a Detroit Plus strategy. The wins that you all saw in Oakland County really, are going to impact the geopolitical nature of our state in positive ways as we think about regional collaboration, but as we think about, just control and power. You know, but then thinking about Kent, Ottawa, Kalamazoo County, Grand Traverse County as well. You know, winning's really a both and equation. We have to engage, we have to persuade, we have to mobilize. It's D, all the above. We have to be paying attention to our coalition is rather than who we think our coalition is or who we want our coalition to be. And then just engaging at earlier in communication timelines is going to be really crucial. I tried to condense some of this for y'all. Hopefully that, you know, was helpful. I'll stop sharing my screen and happy to take any questions.
And if you have any questions for Patrick, click that blue raise hand icon. I'll ask one question that's been in the chat a couple of times. And do you have any opinion on what was the cause for the huge discrepancy between what the polls predicted and what the vote actually was? It was a lot tighter than what the polls predicted.
Yeah, you know, we're all going to obsess over this conversation for another 4 years. You know, I think that, you know, what we should pay attention to is that Biden's vote share actually was pretty accurate. The polls had his vote share pretty close. You know, a number of us were always like, this doesn't feel like a 9 or 10 point race because either Biden wasn't breaking 50 or he was just above 50. At the end of the days, the polls actually got his vote share pretty accurate at the state level. At the battleground level, the district level, why, you know, we you know, should be paying more and more attention to those polls. The races were closer. We saw a huge, you know, difference in that in the 2016 election, why some of us raised the alarm bells in 16. It never really felt the same though as 16. And again, the margin plays out. It just was never a 9 point race here in Michigan. I think we need to stop obsessing about the percentage gap. And we have to pay attention to what that vote share looks like, but we also have to pay attention to, like, how is our coalition engaging in the election when we're talking to them on the phone, when we're engaging them in digital conversations, right? Like, these are all better indicators than what public polls tell us. You know, and also there is definitely conformity bias happening. I even misread it. You know, I travel around the state a lot. I go up north a lot. I know the farmers up there, you know, that weren't flying the Trump flag in 2016, but were flying it proud in 2020. You know, and so it just kind of felt like, oh, maybe there's not that quote unquote shy Trump voter who's engaging in polls is also a major significant factor too. You know, so there's just a ton of things that on the polling end we're going to have to dig into, and this is one of my side hobbies. So, you know, we'll dig into this conversation. Yet once again, traditional landline phone surveys are probably dead.
Chuck Altman, you had a question. Go ahead, please, Chuck.
Yeah, Patrick, thanks for this analysis.
Yeah.
You said that more data is going to be available later. Could you tell us when the data will likely be available and how we can access your analysis down the road?
Yeah, you know, we're hoping to get statewide precinct level data the end of the month here. We'll likely get a statewide voter file update, you know, January timeframe. You know, some of this will ultimately depend on likely how like a statewide audit of the election plays out, how, you know, some of these other factors play out. It's just going to take clerks and the Secretary of State likely more time, even this, you know, post-election to make sure we're, you know, addressing false concerns that exist. So we're hoping that we have data in January where we can do a deeper dive. Already talking with some folks about some of the demographic and racial data for Oakland County right now that we want to dig into. So, you know, hopefully February, March, and then, yeah, I tweet a lot. So once, you know, data starts becoming available, that, you know, will be I intentionally put some of that out on Twitter to help inform conversations. But then, you know, follow up with Dave. Also, Dave knows how to get a hold of me. So,
thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Patrick Shu. That was fascinating and thorough, and I definitely learned a lot from that. This is recorded, of course, so if anybody wants to go back and look through those charts at your leisure, please go ahead. But let's give a nice round of hand waving for Patrick Shu and thank him for coming and giving us that fascinating election debrief.
Thanks, all.
Thank you very much, Patrick.
Hey, Tom, I think Chuck had a question, or you just...
He just asked it.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah. All righty, let's go right on to Democratic Party reports. And I know we had Jody Lamacchia on the call. Jody's a candidate for the chairmanship of the Oakland County Democratic Party. So let's hear from Jody first. Jody, go ahead, please.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for introducing me. For those of you who don't know me, I've been involved in politics since '08 when I was the team leader for the Obama campaign out here in North Oakland. I live in Oxford. I have a lot of questions for Patrick about the graphics. I'm really interested to hear more about that. But anyway, so I've lived in North Oakland for 20 years, and I became the team leader in '08, and that's how I got involved. I've served on the Oakland County Democratic Party a couple of different times. I became the chair of the North Oakland Democratic Party shortly after the 2016 election. And since then, we've tripled our membership, and we're just a very active, engaged club as well, just like you guys are. You have so much energy, and there's always so many people. This is the second time that I've attended your meetings, and the first time I was invited by Ellen Nappau. So anyway, thanks for having me. I am running to be the Oakland County Democratic Party chair. Tom is on the slate as well as a chairman at large, I think is the title. And I'm really excited to just energize the party and to connect with the clubs. I believe that the clubs are really our resource where things get done. And I think we need a good connection between the party, the OCDP, and the clubs, and with the younger people as well. So I also ran for something. I ran for the 46th district this past election, and I had a lot of younger people involved in my campaign, and Lauren Jasinski was part of that because she helps helm the Oakland, the Oxford High School Democratic Club. And so I believe that it's very, very important to make sure that that the young people are engaged, and they want to be engaged. And so I'm hoping to make that a part of me being chair, as well as making sure that we have connections with the young people in all of the club districts. So I'm really, really excited about it. I believe that politics doesn't have to be dry, and I believe that it's community building. And like I don't know if I said this or not. I'm sorry. I'm on coffee. I haven't finished my first cup of coffee yet, so this is why the problem is, I think. But we tripled our club membership in North Oakland since I was the chair, and I believe in growing our community. And I believe also that in no district left behind, and that we have to make sure that we are active and represented in all of the districts, even in those that are very difficult and a lot of the times are written off, like the one that I live in. So anyway, I'm really excited to be the chair. If anyone has any questions about me, about the my background or anything like that, I am just always, I can answer a question right now, but I'm always available. And I do believe in being very accessible. And I believe in, if you want to do something in the Oakland County Democratic Party and you're really stoked about helping out with something in particular, just reach out, because I'm all about getting people into the positions and helping out in ways that they're really passionate about. So that's it. I'm running. I hope that you'll support me. I look forward to working with your club and all of the clubs, actually. And I hope to meet all of you. You can reach me You can reach me either by email, which my email that I'm using is Jody, Jody, at jody2020.com, or my phone number. I'll put it in the chat too. It's 248. Let's see, I'm going to put it in the chat right now. 248-505-3655. So, yeah, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear any, input or feedback that you have. And I'd love to have you involved too. So please reach out and please come to the OCDP meetings, and let's, grow our coalition here in Oakland County.
Thank you very much, Jody. If anybody has any questions for Jody, she just put her contact information in the chat so you can contact her directly. Thanks, Jody.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else have any Democratic Party reports, either from the Oakland County or the 9th District or the state? If you do, click your raise hand icon or unmute yourself and just say something right now. Okay, let's go right on to elected officials reports. If you're an elected official on the call and you have a report you'd like to give, please click that blue raise hand icon and then we'll call on you in order. So go ahead and click that blue raise hand icon if you're an elected official and have a report to give. Now, we usually end our meetings at 11:30. That's not going to happen this morning because we had 2 guest speakers instead of 1. But we will have a hard stop at noon. We won't go a second past noon, so don't worry, you won't be trapped on this call all afternoon. But elected officials, if you could keep it a little brief, because we don't want to keep people over too far if we don't have to. So Royal Oak City Commissioner Pat Perush, go ahead, please.
I can give everyone a real brief construction update because I don't know what other city commissioners are going to add to the conversation. But just for a construction perspective, of course, City Hall personnel have moved into the new City Hall. They're working, many of them remotely because of OSHA and Department of Health restrictions on how many people can be in the building. It's closed to the public, but they're still answering phone call messages and emails. So they're working remotely and they're still working. But they're in the new City Hall. The police station, the new police station, is set to open and receive its employees in January. Their construction process has been slowed down a little bit by the pandemic. They've had some construction crews that have had to go into quarantine, which has slowed down the process. And that's happening, of course, everywhere, but it's affecting the moving into the new police station. But it should happen in January. Also, remediation of the asbestos in the old City Hall is set to happen in January, and the demolition of the City Hall is supposed to be in February. Again, that will be a piece-by-piece type demolition. It's not going to be like an implosion or anything, so it'll take a little bit of time. Also, the contracts for construction of the new park, which is going to go in where the existing City Hall and police station are. Those contracts should be on the City Commission agenda at the end of January. So we should see construction of the park starting this year and hopefully be completed this year. Everything else, I will let somebody else talk about Normandy Oaks if they want to, but that's been moving along as well. But that's been happening with the construction downtown. And at that point, I will stop talking and let the other city commissioners that are here today fill us in on other things.
Thanks, Pat. Then what we'll do is hear from Shar and Brandon, and then if anybody has any city-specific questions, we'll open it up for questions. But Royal Oak City Commissioner Shar Douglas, go ahead, please.
A couple things. I guess I'll do the fun one since I'm here. Some of you may know or may not know that Royal Oak City Commissioner Randy Levasseur resigned suddenly and unexpectedly here right before our last meeting. I see Arv applauding there. He says he is moving to Oxford like he didn't even come to the meeting to say goodbye. He just sent us all an email at 4 o'clock in the afternoon saying he wouldn't be at that meeting and he was resigning from the commission. I will give him credit. He hasn't, he's been out on social media and he hasn't, complained about bad treatment from any of us. At any rate, this opens up an opportunity for the commission to fulfill the role that, or the process that is defined in our charter, in which we as a city commission appoint a replacement. That person then has to run for election to fill out the balance of the term at the next election, which will be next year. So we'll be filling the position for essentially 11 months. Of course, you may recall that just a couple months, less than 2 months ago, we filled the position created by the tragic death of Commissioner Kim Gibbs. A shout out to Brandon Colo. So we will decide at our meeting this coming Monday how we want to proceed to fill the opening created by Levasseur resignation. Obviously, we have a stack of 40-some applications from the preceding process. One might assume that those folks are still interested in running for a seat on the commission, but there are other permutations that we may all bring to the table in our discussion on Monday. Questions?
Thank you, Shar. Then we'll go to Brandon. Then if anybody has any questions about city issues, we'll open it up for there. But Royal Oak City Commissioner Brandon Colo, go ahead, please.
Well, Pat and Shar took the two fun things away to talk about. So I'm just going to go with it's a busy month for the City Commission. We have a lot going on. This week, I'm actually trying to push through some no-cost rapid COVID testing for underserved population. So that'll be a discussion we have at the table. I think it brings value, but we're just looking to improve the community. So it's a good season. We're gearing up, and you know, we had here at Dem Club today, election experts. It is almost election season again. It seems like it just ended. Election season starts now. So we are going to have a big race coming up this upcoming November. We have 4 candidates on the ballot. So, you know, let's all get a little bit more rest, but know that it's time to get going again. So with that, I will give back the time because I know we're running over. I will say that there are 4 city commissioners on this call today, so I don't think any of us will be taking any questions about the appointment process.
All right, and if you have a question for any of the city commissioners, go ahead and click that blue raise hand icon. Otherwise, we'll go on with Mary Mills. Go ahead, please.
I just got my tax bill, and I was wondering, I know the city hall's closed. Do they have a drop box that I could drop that off at, or do you know, at the new city hall?
Yeah, go ahead. Whoever wants to answer it, go ahead, please.
So I'll take that. Yeah, the same drop box you use for voting, you can use to drop off your tax payments. I'll also add that they're establishing curb service in the parking lot. There are like 4 spaces in the parking lot where you can call a department if you've got, you know, some sort of, and I'm still looking for details on this, but you can actually drive up and call the department and people will come out and serve you just like at Kroger.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
If anybody else has any questions for our city commissioners, please click that blue raise hand icon. I wanted to ask you one, Brandon, who are the 4 that are up next year? I can't remember.
It will be Commissioner Douglas, Commissioner Macy, the mayor, and myself. And then there'll be this 5th spot now, this new open spot. Whoever is appointed will have to run for the remainder of Commissioner Lasser's term, which will be 2 years. So they'll be appointed until next November. Then they'd run for another 2-year seat. So it'll be quite a full election this cycle. Tom, I did see a question from Allison in the chat about what's the process to get appointed. That process hasn't been set yet. It will be set at this meeting on Monday night. So Monday night, sometime around 10 o'clock at night, we'll have that discussion. It'll be posted on the city website, I'm sure by Tuesday, if not Wednesday. Either look for that meeting or look for the city website, or I'm sure all our social medias will also have that information on it. But it'll be set at that open public meeting on Monday.
Thanks, Brandon. And Pat, did you have something to add?
Just that the drop box that has been in front of the old police station, the existing police station, has been there for a while, and I'm sure it will stay there until they start the demolition of that building. But then there is another drop box in front of the new city hall on the north side, which was there for ballots, and I'm sure will stay there as the new drop box for city hall. So you can use either one of those right now.
Thanks, Pat. Why don't we hear from our state representative, Jim Ellison. Jim, go ahead, please.
Hey, you got me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. Before we get too far away from City Commission, I think they missed an opportunity, and I'm going to ask them to report on it next month. It gives an update of all the park improvements that are happening. One of the things that I dealt with as my 13 years as mayor is people always complaining that we don't put any money into the parks. And if you drive around the community, you can see that we're putting a lot of money into the park. And so you can give us an update on that, because that answers one of the burning questions that was there through my entire term as mayor. So anyways, but my report, we're in the midst of lame duck. Lame duck is different this year because we now have a Democratic governor and a Republican legislature, so they're not going to pull the wool over our eyes as easy as they've done before. So it makes it a little bit differently. The bills we're working on are mostly extensions of the emergency orders that they all were voted to cancel, and now they're extending them because we still need them. They just want to have their part of it. But from a personal perspective, I've got a couple bills that are making progress. I've got a bill, bill number 5824, which extends the filing date for appeals on county equalization. That has gone through the Senate and the House, and it's getting ready to go to governor for a desk. So if I'm lucky, that'll happen before the end of the year, and I'll get my first public act this year. I'm also working on my bill that I've been working on for about 2 years, which is my House Bill 4035, which is the anti-breed specific legislation, which would enact a law that says you cannot, a municipality or a local government cannot enact an ordinance that prohibits dog based specifically on breed. I've gotten good response. I've got good votes. It's voted off the floor. It's been voted on a Senate committee. I'm just trying to get a Senate floor vote on it. We're fighting that battle because Senator Sharkey is not receptive to the bill, but I do have supporters in the Senate on both sides of the aisle that are trying to convince him to get it on the floor for a vote. Another bill out there, that a couple bills I've got, waiting for a hearing from the Ways and Means Committee, is a bill that will change how we collect personal property tax on rental equipment. In the past, wherever that piece of rental equipment was located on December 31st is the jurisdiction that was able to collect the property tax. So there was always a game played of let's move the equipment out of the state. And so we don't have to pay Michigan tax. So this bill modifies it so that the tax will be levied wherever the owner of the equipment is located in their home base. So that's passed out of Senate or House tax. It's on its way to Ways and Means, and so we're hopeful on that. I dropped a bill that I don't know if it's going to get that far, which is my bill I've talked about since I've been up there, which is my bill to modify the Headley Amendment. I finally dropped that bill last week. And what it does is it allows, as Headley was originally designated, it allows both a roll up and a roll down. When Prop A was voted in, they eliminated the roll up provision, which would allow a community to increase their tax rate if they're in a severe economic slump, which we went through a number of years ago, and that would have helped us immensely. May have prevented us having to institute the public safety millage. But anyway, so it's been dropped. I don't think they've noticed it yet, but anytime you start messing with something as institutionalized as Headley, it's bound to draw some attention. I've been working very closely with the Michigan Municipal League and the township and county associations to try to get something, and they're all supportive of the bill. So keep our fingers crossed that some help for local communities is on its way in the state of modifying Headley. And then finally, more of a local, I have been working with County Executive Coulter and Board Chairman Woodward on forming a caucus of Oakland County Democratic state representatives. Since we now control the county executive seat and we control the county board, it was the three of us decided, amongst other people, that it would be a good idea to have a caucus in Lansing of our Oakland County representatives only, to deal with a lot of our democratic issues and a lot of our goals that have been ignored because we knew that they were dead at the county seat to begin with. So we're going to have our organizational meeting on that coming up here next week, and we'll hope for good things coming Oakland County's way, based on a stronger push that we've got into Oakland County representation. Just as a side note, there are 8 representatives from Oakland County that are Democrats. I'm the old man. Everybody else are these ambitious young women. So it's going to be a good caucus to have, and we're all excited. I've talked to them; they're all excited about it. So hopefully, we'll get that going on the way. And as soon as the new the 101st legislature hits on January 1st, we're going to be already running with our goals. So if anybody's got any questions.
If you have a question for State Representative Jim Ellison, please click that blue raise hand icon. Paul and Claire Vile, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Jim, could you just elaborate on the first bill that you talked about, Oakland County county equalization, I believe you said? Just tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, it's a bill in response to the COVID because everything's been shut down and there's a deadline set. If somebody wants to appeal their assessment at the county level, they had to do it by a certain date. This is more of a fixed bill. We're just extending the deadline so those that want to appeal are not going to be shut down because of the COVID crisis that affected the ability to do business. So that's all it is. It's a bill that got broad support. It's just one of the many things we're doing to try to extend deadlines and make things easier for people to continue to function in a COVID society.
Thanks, Jim.
If anybody else has a question, click that blue raise hand icon. And thanks, Jim, for going after Headley. That's definitely needed. It's just,
yep.
Man,
I don't know if we're going to get anywhere, but we'll try.
Yeah, you know what? It's like you got to make the argument. You know, someone's got to make the argument.
Wait, one other thing. I did want to touch on this just briefly. And the circus came to town Wednesday night, I think, as we're all aware. And my Democratic colleagues were just aghast at how poorly the meeting was run by the chairman of the meeting, how racially charged it was when they went after Representative Cynthia Johnson, and it was just a comedy of whatever. And as we're all joking along, we can watch Saturday Night Live tonight. They don't even have to write a script because it's already been written for them. So it was a circus to behold. But unfortunately, that's kind of the priorities that my Republican colleagues are putting. Is they're still trying to save this election, even though fortunately leadership is not with them. It's just the rank and file far right people that are fostering this. I will say this, and when you need to pass compliments, you got to do it. And we have a Republican state rep, Steve Johnson, who is very much a conservative, almost libertarian force, but he did stand up there and he defended what was going on as far as the election's over, Trump lost, come on, folks, let's move on. So we're all kind of happy to Steve because he is kind of an outsider out there, kind of a right-wing outsider. But anyways, I just need to, when someone does something good, you try to give them some recognition, and so that's what that was. Thank you.
Thank you, State Representative Jim Ellison. I just hope all those Trump voters learn the lesson that voting doesn't matter because the election's rigged, so you may as well just stay home. I think. Anyways, everybody saw from Patrick Hsu that the Democratic Party is doing very well in Oakland County, and Royal Oak is doing very well inside Oakland County as well as far as pushing Democrats to vote. A lot of that has to do with our next speaker, Oakland County Commissioner Dave Woodward. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Tom, and everything. And I think you know why that I asked Patrick to give the election report.
Oh, you just muted yourself, Dave.
I did? Oh,
there you go.
Oh, there we go. Oh, someone. Oh, okay, got it. Thank you, Tom. And I think you all know why I asked Patrick to give that overview of the election. This is what he does. He's so good at it, and I would not done anywhere near as good a job as he did. So, a lot of hard work. The election results are as a result of the long work of everyone in this club, in this area. Royal Oak showing up strong, proving that it is a major power source of Democratic victories at the primary and general election efforts. And as a result of that, we go into the next 2 years, not only in a position to continue to build on the progress to expand opportunity and equality for everyone, but Democrats for the first time ever will be in charge of the redistricting process of the county commission. A result because the Republicans and Brooks Patterson went to Lansing to rig the system against Democrats for decades to come, and it blew up in their face. So quick updates, there's like really two things as we round out the end of the year. Preparing for the vaccine that's being deployed is a top priority of the county. We just got an update. I mean, Oakland County's already secured space to help with the deployment of the vaccine system. Already 4, soon to be 5 locations: Southfield, which is the parking structure at the Civic Center, the below ground parking area so cars can drive in and drive out, and our workers are sheltered from the elements, if you will. Rochester, Holly, and Pontiac right now are the 4 locations, looking at a 5th and 6th one as we speak. The nurse on call number, if you just Google nurse on call Oakland County, will be when the vaccine is available. The refrigerators are coming. The vaccine supply is soon to be coming. Focusing on healthcare workers, nursing home residents and workers as the top priority. And then through CDC guidelines and the state, working in partnership with our health department, we expect more and more groups to be identified so that we can get this vaccine deployed as much as possible to get control of COVID. So it's Oakland's leaning in, and we believe that we've got the capacity to support the vaccine based on our testing capacity that already exists. And I'm glad to hear Commissioner Colo talk about trying to find ways for additional rapid COVID testing. The county, through our health facilities, also has COVID testing at those locations as well. To help support, making certain that we get our testing, hopefully get our testing rates up and our positive rates down to control spread here. Some 3 initiatives I just want to really talk about. Oakland County, we just unveiled in Oakland County about $2 million of grants to Oakland Together Arts and Culture Grant that was just announced end of last month. A number of Royal Oak groups, including Stagecrafters, a recipient of that. Those monies, we know that these institutions, when you can't have crowds gathered, huge revenue need to be able to support these institutions in our community. No other county leaned in as much as that to be able to support our arts and culture organizations across the county. We also have, we're in the process of reviewing applications that just closed for some nonprofit economic impact grants. These are grants up to $50,000 to help offset economic interruptions of other nonprofits that wouldn't maybe necessarily fall in the arts and culture space. Trying to push these CARES dollars out as much as possible to be able to support to support our nonprofit community that's really in the front line to, kind of making up that safety net necessary to protect families in our communities going forward and to put them in a stronger position for next year. And the last thing I'm really excited about and playing a role in the design of, we announced earlier this week in front of the Royal Oak Brewery, one of my favorite places, the Oakland Together Restaurant Rescue Program. It's a $10 million initiative to provide economic relief to restaurants that have been impacted by the most recent health order, as well as provide funding to help support weatherization, outdoor dining in the months ahead, and some money to support PPE, technology, and other equipment to help them all open safely. I've actually got a message on this part of this meeting that the Restaurant Association of Michigan, very excited and appreciative. It's a huge amount for one single county, and looking to do more, whatever we have to do. I think it's the mindset we need to be in is like, what do we have to do to get through this month and next month and get us to a position that we can get a little bit back to normal, hopefully by Memorial Day, when we get a massive vaccine deployment across the state and across the country. So I'll stop at that.
If you have a question for Oakland County Commissioner Dave Woodward, please click that blue raise hand icon. And also, if we have any other elected officials on the call who'd like to give a report, click that blue raise hand icon because I can't see everybody. But Dave, I wanted to thank you for doing something about the community theaters. That's something I dabble in. It would have been tragic if we'd lost our community theaters because of the coronavirus.
I know my colleague, Commissioner Lubes, is on, so
Right.
she might have some things that I left off.
Yeah, we'll call on Penny next. Bob Jerva, you had a question? Bob Jerva?
Yeah. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Bob.
What I heard on the news last week is that the commission is, I guess, required by regulation to bring up pay raises for the commission and other elected offices in Oakland County. What's your position on that? My personal opinion is I don't think giving yourself a raise right now with so many people suffering is really a very good idea. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. As a county, that we are on Monday, we're approving the implementation of a compensation study. We're actually giving $12 million of raises to our entire county workforce. This is something that's in process over the years. The practice for elected officials is we take care of all the raises across the organization first, and then we look at elected officials. By law, we're required before the start of the next term to take action. Normally, this would have happened during the budget process, but the compensation study for the entire organization wasn't completed until just recently, which we'll be approving. The way that Oakland County's practice is that we treat everyone the same. And so when a raise is applied across the organization, that's the same for elected officials. When a pay cut happens, it happens across everybody, including elected officials. And as we're looking right now, the compensation study roughly is about a 3.2% average increase across the organization. There's some variation because there's some reclassifications and a series of other things, something that really hadn't been done for decades. And that's the decision that we have to make a decision, not just the Board of Commissioners. I know the story that went out was it's focused on the board, but all our countywide positions in sync with how past practice has always happened on this particular issue. And that's going to, Finance Committee is looking at it, and the chair of the Finance Committee, Commissioner Helene Zach's taking it up.
Are there any other questions for Dave? If not, let's go ahead. Penny Lubes, Oakland County Commissioner Penny Lubes, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Hello, everybody. I wanted to add to Dave's report about our city, village, township grants that we were able to provide to Royal Oak $1,356,058 to reimburse pay, supply, safety, public, and election workers during the pandemic. We're also offering free legal and financial consultation for small businesses through December 18th. So businesses can choose two of the lawyer financial firms in the program to provide 2 hours each of free professional consultation. We've also started an Oakland County Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council, which is composed of 31 people, so they'll begin meeting soon. And the last item to report on is we're now beginning work on our Youth in Government Day, which is February 3rd. It's been an annual in-person event, but next year it will be a virtual half-day event. So right now in the process of contacting all the schools to see who would like to participate in our half-day event. It helps with our younger population in building enthusiasm for elections. And that's it. Thank you.
If you have a question for Penny Lubes, please click that blue raise hand icon. Paul, it looks like you had a question. Go ahead, please. Paul Curtis.
Yeah, no, it's the first I heard about the free consult with law firm and finance folks and for small biz. You said there's a deadline of December 18. How does somebody take advantage of that?
You can go to the Oakland County website, and there's a link there to request an appointment or to call. I can look it up. I looked it up earlier, but I've forgotten what it is.
Okay.
Link in the chat, Paul.
Thank you, Brandon.
And thank you, Oakland County Commissioner Penny Lubes. Mary Ann Van Heitzma, Royal Oak School Board Trustee, if you could go ahead and give your report, please.
I popped it out quickly in the chat as well, but so our students are remaining remote through January 29th at this point. They have an upcoming holiday break beginning December 21st through the 1st of the year. And again, we're continually grateful to the staff for our engagement levels have been really good. So we're very happy for that. And so they've been very successful in engaging students on a regular basis. So we're very grateful for that. We're also very grateful to a lot of the organizations that are continuing to support students and our families. You know, Blessings in a Backpack, Roya, the foundation, and our PTAs have been doing a lot of, you know, holiday meals, holiday gathering of items, and just the continual support, you know, to Roya as well with emergency needs grants. So we're very grateful for all of that. At such time when we do come back to school, because we've also received funding through the CARES Act to allow us to, you know, purchase a lot of sanitizing equipment, and other things to make our schools a safer place when students are able to return and staff. So yeah, I don't think I have anything else, just in the essence of time. Thank you.
Alrighty. If anybody has any questions for Mary Ann about the schools, click that blue raise hand icon. Michelle Cook, go ahead, please.
Hi, yeah, I have a question. I know that the schools have to reconsider their, their reopening plan each month. They have to, kind of reconfirm what they are doing. And I do have a question about parent participation in the process of the, the plans that are being put forward and how they will be considered in the future. And I also have a concern about the virtual academy. At one point, it ended up getting reconsidered, but parents that were not willing to go into the hybrid plan were going to have to choose the virtual academy. And then the board reconsidered and gave us a, option to stay remote. But there are, a lot of people that are in the virtual academy. And from what I understand, a number of them are choosing that because they cannot get a guarantee from the district that they could continue remotely. They would be in that same sort of category. We were in this limbo of whether we would be able to continue remotely or not. And I have some real concerns about the quality of that program. And so if you could just address, how parents can have more input into the system. Thank you.
Certainly. So I don't know what school your child is at, or if you're in the middle school or the elementary or the high school. But certainly, though, those specific questions in regards to the virtual academy, I would recommend sending, you can email the board, Ms. Fitzpatrick, and your principal with those specific questions so we can address them. And I know there was some concerns. I don't want to get into the specifics, nor do I have the expertise that Ms. Fitzpatrick or the principal will have, but please send an email in regards to that as a follow-up, and I'll follow up with Mrs. Fitzpatrick as well to just see what we've done to address those concerns. I don't know specifically how to answer your question correctly, so I want to make sure that I address it with her, if that's okay. But yeah, we do have to do our plans every month as well. And the one thing that we've asked people, that the board has asked, is that there's some specific parameters as far as when do we decide that it's safe to return. So that was something we had asked for at the last board meeting as well.
Yeah, I'm afraid we won't have time to delve into that huge question. But yeah, boy, it's a hell of a year. But thank you, Mary Ann Van Heitzma from the Royal Oak School Board. Last item on the agenda here is a calendar. Our next meeting's on Saturday, January 9th. Now, ordinarily, we meet the first Saturday, but because that's a holiday weekend, we push it back a week. So our next meeting will be Saturday, January 9th at 10 a.m. We're going to have Dr. Kevin Deegan-Krause. He's an expert on ranked choice voting, which is quite interesting. It's a way to make our democracy more responsive. I think it's an excellent idea, but you can hear more from Dr. Deegan-Krause next month. Also next month, of course, we will have our election for our 2021 officers, chair, vice chair, secretary, and treasurer. If you're interested in running or voting for an officer, then you have to be a dues paying member. So the information on how to pay dues is in the emails, in the chats, and you can just pay your dues and be on that. Also next month, if you're interested in volunteering for our club board, you can do that at the 2021 meeting, or you can send an email to me or Lauren. Just tell us you're interested in serving on the board next year. Our board is what plans all of our activities, finds our guest speakers for the meetings, and we tend to be more involved and get out the vote and voter turnout work and so on too. So if you're interested in serving on the board, bring that up at the January meeting. Does anybody have any other calendar items or good and welfare items?
Hey, Tom, I just had a quick update about the Georgia postcards. Over the last couple weeks, club members have been hard at work writing postcards to voters in Georgia to remind them to request to request an absentee ballot and to vote starting in the early election on December 14th. We purchased 5,000 postcards from our club, and I have 150 left to distribute. So if you are interested at all in doing that or helping with this last little push, they need to get in the mail no later than December 12th. So we've got a little bit longer to do that, but just reach out to me and I can hook you up with some postcards.
Yeah, Lauren, right after the meeting, I'm going to come by and grab 50. I never grabbed mine.
And join us Monday at 7. We're having a Zoom where we write the postcards.
Yeah, if you could put the link to that in the chat, Arv, I'd appreciate it. Does anybody else have any calendar items or good and welfare? Well, thank you very much, everybody. This will be my last meeting chairing. I'm not running for re-election as chair next month, but it's just been a heck of a time. I really appreciated leading this club for as long as I did, but thank you very much for that. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. For 2020. Bye, 2020.
For 2020, a motion to adjourn for 2020. Goodbye, 2020. All in favor of adjourning, please indicate by waving your hands.
Yay.
All opposed, vote no. Okay, thanks everybody, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Hey, Tom, congrats on the last meeting. You've done quite a job.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for everything.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. Good leadership over the past few years. We appreciate it.
Lots of great work.
Big shoes
Lots
to
of great work. Thank you.
Big
Thanks,
shoes
everybody.
to fill, Tom.
Bye, everybody. Happy holidays.
Bye.